in round of 3 until the lunch break. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce Chris Cole from Drones War UK.
Thank you very much. Very delighted to be here and to speak on this important issue. Would it be possible, really, to move the kind of conversations outside and the telephone conversation outside? That would be very kind, thank you. As we all know, drones are the new way to wage war.
Could we please move the conversations outside so people can hear Chris's speech, please? Thank you.
At the moment, there are 3 countries that are known to have used armed drones: the UK, the US, and Israel, and about 12 countries that have been the victims of drone strikes: Iraq and Afghanistan, Pakistan and Yemen, Somalia, Libya, Gaza, Egypt and Sudan, and the Philippines and Mali. This, I think, will just be the tip of the iceberg. We'll look back in a few years' time and see that this was just a small amount. In future, with the growing proliferation of drones through the international arms trade, there will be many more countries who will be victims of drone strikes. Britain first began using drones in January 2004 when they used US drones in Iraq. That's almost a decade ago. And like a mark, really, been given his first free taste by a pusher, the UK has been addicted to the drone wars ever since. Despite the imminent drawdown from Afghanistan, Britain is in the process of doubling its armed drone fleet, and is also developing a new drone in conjunction with Israeli company Elbit System called the Watchkeeper. And in lots of ways, Israel is the force behind the growing use of drones around the world. Around 40% of all drone exports come from Israel, and it's a huge money spinner for the Israeli regime. The UK has already spent over £2 billion on buying and developing drones, and despite the cuts to social services that we're all hugely aware of and austerity budgets, the UK is about to spend a further £2 billion on a brand new drone under the MOD's scavenger programme. The UK is hand in glove with the US and Israel in its drone wars. And it's the arms companies, as Jeremy said earlier, that are going to profit from this. Our old friends, BAE Systems, Lockheed Martin, Elbit Systems, and Northrop Grumman. They're rubbing their hands together in glee at the prospect of this rise of this new weapon system, of the fact that dozens and dozens of countries around the world now want to spend billions of pounds and dollars on yen on drones. And if there are objections from political objections or moral objections, the arms companies, as we all know, have tame politicians in their pocket to back them up. Earlier this year, for example, in the US, because of sequestration, because of budget cuts, the Pentagon wanted to cut the number of Global Hawk drones it was buying from Northrop Grumman. But Northrop Grumman deployed its tame politicians in Congress, and above the objections from the Pentagon and above objections from the White House, got their drone order reinstated. And I think that shows the incredible power of the arms trade lobby. And as others have said this morning, we're now becoming more and more, we're now seeing a more and more war-weary public. And as Lindsay said this morning, that was most obviously seen in the vote over Syria. But does this mean that the US and Europe will stop wanting to impose their aims and objectives on other countries? Certainly not likely. I mean, I think we all know that empire has learned to cope many times with war-weary citizens. And it's in part, I think, why we're seeing the rise of the drone wars. It's part of the strategy to bypass the need for boots on the ground. It's part of the strategy to bypass the need for public support for military adventures. And part of the need, as Jeremy said, to bypass public and media scrutiny of military interventions overseas. And it's not just speculation on my part that's saying that. Some of you will have seen just a few weeks ago, The Guardian revealed a British MOD policy document that talked about how the MOD could cope with what it called a casualty-averse public. And by that, of course, they mean our casualties, not any other countries. And this strategy included the idea of lowering the profile, as they called it, of repatriation ceremonies, of a greater use of private military companies, and of course much more investment in the use of drones. So drones make military intervention around the world much easier, enable secrecy, and lower public accountability. Secrecy and lies, I think, come as part and parcel of the package when it comes to the drone wars. One lie that we're constantly told, those of us who are researching and challenging the use of drones here in the UK, is that British drone strikes are a rare occasion. If you ever hear of the MOD or the government talk about British drone strikes, and that's a very rare thing, they will say drone strikes hardly ever happen. But we know from information prized out of the government and the MOD through freedom of information requests that there are about 9 weapons launched from British drones every month in Afghanistan. That's about 2 drone strikes per week in Afghanistan, 2 British drone strikes per week. Now, I don't know what your definition of rare is, but that's not my definition of a rare event. Another big lie that's told about the drone wars is the kind of myth of accuracy. You know, any media report where you hear about drone strikes, you will hear the phrase pinpoint accurate or precision. You know, it's almost as though the media believe that instead of the missiles being called Hellfire or Brimstone, they're called precision or pinpoint accurate missiles. And advocates of drone strikes like to portray drone warfare as kind of like a reverse or inverse version of the rapture. You know, the kind of evangelical Christian belief that at the end of time, all the good people will be simply taken away and the bad people left behind. Well, drone advocates like to portray drone warfare as like that, except in the reverse, that all the bad people are simply taken away, leaving innocent behind. And that's a myth, of course. It's a kind of Hollywood version of air warfare. The reality is that there is no such thing as a guaranteed pinpoint accurate drone strike. And many people support the drone wars out there because they think they're accurate. But as we saw just this week, on Thursday, there was a drone strike in Afghanistan in which a 2-year-old child and 2 women, a 2-year-old child was killed and 2 women were seriously injured. And President Karzai demanded that the US, that NATO stop these strikes. And the NATO spokesman came out and apologized and said what was happened is that we aimed at this insurgent and we missed him, and then we had launched another strike, and unfortunately he killed a 2-year-old child and injured 2 women. So the idea that there is a precision, that you can launch a weapon 10 miles high, from a drone flying 10 miles high, aiming at a moving target 5 miles away, through bad weather, through cloud, and when the pilot sitting in Waddington in Lincolnshire or Creech outside Las Vegas hits the button, there's a 4-second delay. The idea that you can be pinpoint accurate with this weapon is an absolute Hollywood nonsense. The other big lie that's told about drone warfare is that, of course, that drones are an effective means of creating peace and security in our world. Tell that to the thousands of people who've been victims of drone strikes in Pakistan, or the thousands of people who've lost family members in suicide bombing in reaction to the drone strikes. Drone strikes are creating anti-Western feeling, and far from leading to peace and security, are doing just the reverse. An even bigger lie, of course, is that drone strikes are ethical because they're the only choice we have. Leon Panetta, the former head of the CIA, said they're the only game in town. The argument goes that if we don't use drone strikes, we'll have to have a mass ground invasion of Waziristan, or we'll have to use hundreds of cruise missiles. Therefore, we use drone strikes, and that makes them ethical because they're cause less damage. Now that's worthy of Joseph Goebbels. You know, the idea that if you can think of something worse, it makes the option that you choose okay. On that ground, chemical weapons could be the ethical choice because you're doing it instead of using nuclear weapons. Well, you can choose to do anything if you can think of a worse option. It's absolute nonsense. So drones are eroding the laws of war. Drones are doing serious damage to global peace and security. And drones are seducing us away from political and diplomatic solutions, you know, in favour of taking out the bad guy, you know. Instead of doing long-term proper counter-terrorism work, we're turning into gangsters. Drones and the arms industry that are pushing the rise of the drone wars are creating global insecurity problems. And our task as anti-war activists, as global justice advocates, is to stop the rise of the drone wars. Thank you very much.